Hey guys, coming back for the Diaries, Season 7, Episode 15, I Would For You, and I was really looking forward to this episode because last week's episode really seemed like we were going somewhere, and I was right, because not only did we go somewhere in this episode, we finally jumped 3 years in this episode. We finally got to that 3-year time jump, and I'm gonna say this: a lot of what happened, to get to that 3 years really did work. There's a lot that really did. There are definitely some gaps that I think they still need to fill in order to make this season as satisfying as it could be. Because right now, I'm fine with the time jump. There are just a lot of loose ends that I still am kind of confused by. But let's just get into this episode, because overall, I did really enjoy it, and definitely one of the more solid episodes of this season. I mean, there really were some great scenes in this episode. And here's the thing, Nora and Mary Louise were nowhere to be found, which was awesome, and I was very happy about that because we didn't even really need them in this episode. This is an episode that really is constantly moving, and I really did like that, so let's just get into it. So, we see Rayna walking in New Orleans. She's naked and near the swamp. She sees tents nearby and a fire. And I gotta say, every episode, I'm liking Rayna more and more. I mean, she really, the actress that plays her, I think, really does this great job being this very menacing presence. And she walks over, steals clothes off the line, then retrieves her sword. She sets off with determination. And a guy approaches a woman walking through the streets of Mystic Falls, and it's Penny, and he is a vampire. He threatens Penny. The Matt stakes him from behind, but misses the heart. And I like this scene. I like seeing Matt kind of explain to Penny the way the vampires work because, she's not as experienced, but she needs to know how it works, and I like the way that that's going. Other vampires show up and surround them. It looks bad, but then Rain is there, kills them all, and then basically asks Matt if he knows a vampire named Stefan, and of course we know that she's going after Stefan because he's marked, so basically, Valerie's with Stefan, and he says he just used the last of Freya's herbs, and Valerie says that they will get more of them. Stefan says he just wants to get more herbs and see Caroline, and Valerie rolls her eyes at him. You can tell that she still has feelings for him, and he asks if she enjoys this, and she says that there's some constants in the lack of constants, and Valerie and Stefan get out at a witch herb greenhouse, and they look around and see hundreds of plants, and basically you can tell that they're trying to find a way to, because Freya's herbs, that was the way they got rid of Rayna, and they're going to try to find, and they know that Rayna's going to come back, so they're trying to get rid of her. So Bonnie ignores a call from Enzo, and Damon comes in with coffee, and her magic's back, luckily, and he says that he has a plan to kill Rayna, but it's the Damon-only show, and basically, Enzo calls again. Bonnie says he might know and decides to take the call, and she thinks that he's ready to apologize, but Damon says that he can't let her go back there, and says she almost died for him, and he can't let it happen again, and obviously he wants her to stay alive. And I gotta say, the best handled stuff in this episode was definitely Damon and Bonnie. We'll get into the way this was handled, because I think they did this very well. Raina's threatening vampires and tells Matt and Penny that they need to treat them like wild animals. Dangerous, she tells the vampire that she has to tell her about Stefan. Damon's there and says that that's the wrong vampire, and Raina says he's dumb enough to come there. And Matt shoots Rayna, and Damon rips her heart out, and Matt tells Penny that Damon and Stefan are his friends, and Damon hands Matt the sword, says get rid of it, then asks where he can find a buzzsaw, and, of course Penny's confused, because Matt's saying, oh, I hunt vampires, yet he's friends with you vampires, so she really doesn't fully understand that, and I think it's very interesting the way that this goes. Now, the way that the way the storyline kind of goes is actually quite interesting. We'll get into what ends up happening, but basically, Damon hacks her up, bags her, then throws her down a well, and her body lights into flames and smoke rises up on it, and Damon says, here we go, and groans. She's back in one piece, cracks her neck, because of course, you can't kill her. She looks up and sees that Damon threw some clothes down into her, and she asks if he's going to put the lotion in the basket. He says, if I stayed dead, he wouldn't have to, and he says he has plans, and her hunting his brother is messing up his plans, and she says let her kill his brother, then he can do what he wants, and he says that family is such a hassle. He says they need a plan B, and she says it's her nature. Raina says family's the reason, this is her nature. She says her father envisioned a world without vampires, and won't rest till she sees that through. So, I like that they explain this more, because I really couldn't tell what those flashbacks were trying to show with Raina, if they just show that her father was, threatening her or trained her or something. But no, now we really know what her motive is, that her father's wanted her to hunt vampires and get rid of all of them, and she wants to fulfill that goal because he couldn't. Now, that's a very compelling arc to take this character in, and I think they can do a lot with that, and I'm interested in seeing what they do with that, because that really is very interesting, for a direction for her to go in, which I really liked. So Valerie and Stefan then walk through the greenhouse. She identifies lots, but can't find the one. And he admits to smoking pot when they spot some, and she asks who with, and he says her name was Rebecca. And I forgot that Stefan and Rebecca used to date, but I like that they referenced that because, of course, Stefan did reference in the originals last week. And Stefan then spots the place where the herb was, and it's all gone. And a woman comes out; she's all scraped up, and then spray comes down. They've knocked out, and Bonnie then meets Enzo and asks if the hand grew back, and he says that he had to reattach it, and she shrugs. And Bonnie says disable her magic again, and she'll cut off more than his hand. And Enzo says that she's a Damon groupie, and Alex then shows up, introduces herself to Bonnie, and Alex says that Enzo wasn't following protocol and says Rayna is a common enemy. And Bonnie says that they know more about Rayna than they're revealing. Alex says that that's fair and tells Bonnie to follow her. She takes her to a room of Rayna into info and the shaman's bodies that were sacrificed to make her. And she says that there's not. He says that he was a jerk but changed, and says maybe she needs the right person too. And he actually tried to find someone and asks if there was a Mr. Hunter. Bonnie texts and says Rayna has just 2 lives left. He shoots her, another of the body desiccates, and Enzo threatens Bonnie's life, and Bonnie sasses him, says that she did nothing. He says Damon's an idiot and says Rayna comes back stronger every time, and she asks why they want her alive, which, that's a valid question. I mean, her question, why do you want to keep her alive if you want to go after her? And Enzo shows her the spell that created Rayna, and she reads about the spell that linked Rayna to the sword. There's another part of the spell, if Rayna dies, so does anyone she marked. So obviously, now that's very interesting. I like the way that this is going. It makes sense why Stefan's not going to die, because obviously, if if Rayna dies, Stefan dies, and that makes sense. Now we know how Rayna survives for 3 years. I mean, how would she just survive? Because, now we know that anyone that kills Rayna, it kills Stefan. It's kind of like Klaus's sire line that no longer exists, which I'll get into in the originals. But I like the way this was handled, I gotta say. And Enzo tells her that Stefan has a scar, and obviously they're not gonna kill Stefan. They're trying to protect him. So Bonnie calls Damon, asks where's Rayna. He says shallow grave. Bonnie says dig her up and says if Rayna dies again, so will Stefan. And I like that she told Damon, look, don't kill Rayna. It's not gonna end well. So Stefan comes to. Valerie's awake, waiting for him. The woman says she's sorry and isn't used to visitors. And Valerie says that someone took the herbs that they need. The woman says that herb is a rare for a reason, and that's how she was wounded. And she says that this was the only source of it in the world. And Penny's surprised to hear from Matt that they are bad vampires and sort of good ones, because she thought that they were all bad. And, knowing that there's good, he says Damon killed his sister but has changed, and says his brother's a good one, Stefan. She asks if the good one feeds on people and kills them, and Matt says not now, and it's complicated. Penny says he helped a vampire take down a vampire killing machine. Here's the thing, Damon did not kill his sister. That was all Stefan. I mean, Damon kind of just, Damon was the one that turned her into a vampire, but Stefan was the one that killed her. So I don't know why they said Damon killed his sister. I mean, that's, continuity issue right there, definitely, but, you know, I'm only pointing it out because I read something about it, and I would agree, yeah, that is definitely a problem. So Matt says that she has no idea what he's been through. She says maybe he went through more because he never took a stand. And this conversation, it's a very interesting conversation, but where this goes is very strange. We'll get into that. Damon goes with a shovel to dig up Rayna. He hurries before she dies, and he digs with his hands desperately, because obviously he's not going to let her die. And I do like seeing Damon really step into action to save his brother. I mean, it really does show that, how much these two care about each other, but we already know how much Damon and Stefan care about each other. We don't really need reassurance of that, but I thought this was very well handled, I gotta say. So Lark and Caroline are in crying baby hell. He brings people diapers to her and grabs bottles. Stefan calls, and this is the one thing that really didn't work about this episode for me. I mean, we knew that Stefan and Caroline were going to break up. We knew that the end was definitely coming. But the way it happens here, it felt very casual, and it really didn't feel big. And Stefan calls, says he can't come soon because of the herbs. She's distracted, and he says he can't slow down, but asks if she can come meet him, and he says they can go to Europe, and Caroline says that she wants to see him, but it's a war zone here, and Alaric needs her, and Stefan says he understands. She asks what he thinks about Dallas, and says it's not a terrible place, and she wants to be near the babies, and then the crying starts again. Alaric, begs for backup in diapers. She tells him she loves him, ends the call, and basically they just broke up because she wants to be in Dallas, which I really thought was kind of a dumb reason. I mean, there could have been more there. Like, maybe, why did they have to break up because of that? That really didn't make much sense to me. I mean, her just ending the call, and yeah, they never said they broke up, but Stefan says later in the episode, oh, we broke up, and I don't know, just something about that. The way that she goes from just this to then hating Stefan 3 years later really makes no sense to me. I mean, she never said, I'm mad at you. She just wants to be closer to Alaric, and, you know, Dallas is just not the place for Stefan to be right now. So this really didn't seem like as harsh as a breakup as I thought we were getting to, because I really thought we were going to get a harsher breakup, and we really didn't. And the time jump really does not make sense. We'll get into that. But basically, she says Caroline is staying, and he admits it's true, and Valerie says they'll figure something out. He gasps and nearly collapses, and he asks what's happening. Damon finally gets to Rayna. He tries to revive her. Stefan is dying, we see. Damon feeds vampire blood to Rayna and then does CPR. Nothing seems to be working. And Valerie tries to revive Stefan with magic, but can't siphon it. Damon keeps on with the CPR. Finally, Rayna comes back, chokes to life, and so does Stefan. And Rayna gasps. Excuse me. And Seven says, thank God. Rayna grabs him by the neck and throws him, and he says, uh-oh. Rayna says, uh-oh is right. Bonnie looks for a way to stop Rayna from killing Damon, is angry and asks if she thinks Damon cares that much for her, and she says she does. Damon stalls Rayna and asks about Mr. Hunter, which I thought this was a pretty funny scene. The way that he's just trying to keep her alive. She says it was a vampire, and she staked him. She says run, and she doesn't mind chasing him. He comes to her, she hits him with the shovel, and then she goes to decapitate him. Damon says he can't kill her, and she says all he did was get himself killed, and she goes to stake him, then a dart shoots into her neck, then a bunch more in her back and her chest. It's the armory, they came for her. She goes down unconscious, and Enzo stares at the last elder that's still alive, and basically, Alex comes in, says they got Rayna. She's annoyed he let Bonnie go and says Rayna was their number one target and Bonnie was their number two. And this is the other thing. I'll get into Enzo and Bonnie, but I really don't think they've handled this very well at all, I gotta say. Stefan then meets Damon, says she was taken, then explains the last life was what would kill him, and he says he killed her, then had to save her. Damon says the armory has her locked down. He says it's what they have, and Stefan says that Caroline's staying with Alaric, and he says he knew that, and he saw it coming. Seven says Rayna will always hunt him and says there are kids involved, so he can't be near Caroline. And, obviously, Rayna could come for his family. I understand that's a reason why they break up. It just doesn't really make sense to me how Caroline goes from, oh, we need to protect our kids. Do you want to come to Dallas to, I never want to see Seth and Salvatore again. That really doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't really know how they tie that up, because that's definitely something that I don't really understand how that's going. So Damon says good plan. He hands and Seven says they need to get rid of the scar, because if they get rid of the scar, then there's no issues about him dying. There's nothing wrong with that. So Damon says good plan. Hands him an envelope and says for him. Damon says he's been walking a tightrope and always falling, and he says he's not a good brother when he's not with Elena. Damon says he's going to desiccate with Elena until she comes back. Stefan's annoyed that he's ready to leave him when he always sacrificed for him. And Damon says it's temporary and they'll see him again. And Stefan says that if you care about me at all, you won't walk out on me. Damon says save a good bottle of bourbon for me and says see you in 60 and walks out. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know why Stefan's mad at him for doing this. I can understand why it's wrong that he's doing this, but it really does make the most sense. I mean, we've really seen Damon not be himself, and he wants to save his brother, and he knows is what he has to do, and maybe if he has to save his brother, maybe he just can't be around, and I think that would make sense. And then we get this thing that it comes out of nowhere. Matt comes to see Stefan, he's really pissed, and Matt says that he's been thinking about his place in the town, it's his home, and him not being strong enough, he says as long as they're vampires, humans will be at their mercy. He says they don't stand a chance against them, and it stops today. Stefan stands and faces off with him. Matt says vampires have to leave Mystic Falls for good, and Stefan says this is his home too. Matt hands him footage from the grill and says he has footage of him too, and he says he has hundreds of hours of surveillance footage and threatens to expose them all just by putting them onto YouTube, and Matt says he has till the end of the day to clear out. So basically what Matt's saying is, look, I'm gonna put this footage of all of the killings on YouTube and then see what happens to you. And I don't know. This is an arc that I think would make sense for Matt to go in maybe 2-3 seasons ago, but Matt really hasn't been relevant in this for a while, and it really, for me, it seems like they just kept Matt around just to keep him around, and I don't know, this really seemed like an arc that should have happened in, like, season 3. If when Vicky died in, like, season 2, that would have made a lot more sense to me, do it then. Don't do this now. I don't really think was the time to do this because, we know that Vicky died, obviously, when she did, but I don't know, this just didn't make as much sense to me, and I don't really know why we all of a sudden got back to this. Through one conversation with Penny, I understand, but Matt's a guy that's always had his morals. He's always been close to Damon and Stefan. Why all of a sudden is he rethinking this? That really didn't work, and I knew, of course, that Matt was gonna get to this point of being this vampire hunter and hunting all vampires, because of course we saw in the flash forward, but it really seemed like that's why they did this. They only did it to connect it to the flash forward, and I don't know, it just didn't work. I do like seeing Matt have something, significant to do, but I don't know, it seems like it's something that should have happened maybe 2, 3 seasons ago. Now is not the time to really do that. So Damon goes to Brooklyn to a storage building to shut himself in with Elena. And in Dallas, Alaric finds a bottle of bourbon and a note from Damon. It says he knows he's a jerk for doing things this way and says he's a jerk. He tells him he's desiccating until Elena wakes up. He says Alaric deserves the truth. He says he told Stefan the world's better without him. And Damon says he doesn't care about the world and he's just miserable. And Caroline then comes in holding the babies and smiling. Alaric looks at her. Damon says he can't be without that feeling. Stefan peers in the window at Caroline and Alaric happy with the babies. He slumps against the house for a minute, then texts Valerie that they need to keep moving. Damon touches Elena's coffin, and then we get this amazing scene with Bonnie. I mean, Damon and Bonnie's scenes have pretty much been the strongest this entire season. I mean, they are the one thing that really has kept me watching. Well, there's been a few things that have kept me watching, but one of the big things is Damon and Bonnie, and I gotta say, Kat Graham really sold, how much she cares about Damon in the scene. I love the way this was done. And she says that he wasn't going to say goodbye and says that she didn't believe it when Enzo told her. And he says that he wrote her a letter. Bonnie asks if they're friends. And it's a good question. I mean, if you're just going to leave me, are we really friends? And Damon says, of course, and then tries to make a joke. She asks again and says, seriously, she says that he did this in a letter so he could desiccate in peace. She says, too bad, and then says she's not okay with this. She says doesn't get to choose himself like this, and she's not okay never seeing him or Lane again. She says this hurts her. She's crying, then stops and says he desiccates and the blood drains out from him. Remember that he hurt her. Damon says, listen. She says no. She says he doesn't get to say goodbye, and she walks out. And I can understand why Bonnie's upset. I mean, this was someone that he really has cared about saving, and now all of a sudden, he's just gonna leave her. I can understand why she's really upset with him there. So, I love the way that that scene was done, and it actually was very effective. Stefan's, on the other hand, I can understand, but Stefan needs to realize that Damon's really doing this for him, and Stefan, honestly, is kind of better without Damon, because when Damon's not around, there's not as much, killing, things like that, there's not as much protecting Damon. Stefan kind of needs to be on his own for right now, so I can understand why Damon had to do it. With Bonnie, on the other hand, he was going to leave without saying goodbye to her, and he is supposed to be her best friend, and he says, oh, you're my best friend, but he doesn't really treat her like she is, and I can understand why she's really upset about that. So I'm not upset that Bonnie yelled at him for this. She had all the reason to, definitely. I think that definitely made sense there. So Damon looks at the coffin, then looks at the lights of the city, because he knows he's not going to see daylight for a very long time. He closed the warehouse door, gets in the coffin, he nods in determination. He's just like, I need to do this, I know I'm going to do this, I have a reason for doing this. He shuts the lid, and Ian Somerhalder, I really think, sold that scene just by not talking. I mean, you can tell the look on his face. He's really regretful, but he knows this is what he has to do, and he's not going to let anyone stop him. This is what he's chosen to do. He has reasons for doing it, and he's going to stick by those reasons. So I thought that was very effective the way they did that. So then we finally jump to 3 years later, and Stefan opens the lid, and we kind of see a montage of everything we saw in the flash forwards, just kind of like a recap of where we are. He says, wake the hell up, feeds in blood. Stefan says they have to go. Arrows strike the coffin. We see Caroline being shot, Bonnie being in therapy, together with Enzo, and Damon telling Alaric that Caroline will be used as bait. All that stuff that we saw before, we finally see here. Now, there are some issues, though, for me. Some of the things that didn't work here is Bonnie and Enzo. There has been really no point in the show where we've really seen these two romantic. We haven't really seen them in a place where they want to be together. I mean, most times we've seen them in each other's throats. We even saw, uh, you know, um, Alex tell Enzo we need to kill Bonnie. There's really been nothing with Bonnie and Enzo, so there's a lot of loose ends that need to tie up there. And also, why does Caroline have this hate for Stefan? That doesn't really make much sense to me. What's happened in these 3 years, we don't exactly know. I mean, we've seen these flash forwards, but we don't really know what's happened since Damon was sleeping. So that's the one thing that didn't work as well for me. Of course, we know that Stefan's been with Valerie, Caroline's now with Alaric, Rayna has Damon poisoned him with werewolf toxin, Matt was forced to help Rayna, and I like that we know that Matt was forced. Like, this was kind of his choice, but he was basically forced to help her. And Rayna's kind of now just descended on them and kind of taken over the entire town. And we know how bad Mystic Falls is 3 years from now. So there is a lot of stuff that we know, but there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. But I do like the way this ends because it seems genuinely tense. We see Seven tied to a chair. Rayna's there, says he came to her when he was safe, and she says that he was smart then got dumb. She says she choose someone he loves, Damon and Caroline. She asks which one did he come for, and Stefan says nothing. She says he can think about it in hell. Then she says that there's plan B. He asks what that is. Rayna says that she doesn't want to kill him and says someone else deserves that mark and says she can transfer it. She says it should have been Damon all along that got marked. That was who it was for. Seven says nice try pitting us against each other. Damon says it was his idea, not hers. He walks out of the shadows, and that's how the episode ends. So overall, I'm really happy that the show is going somewhere, and it really seems like they are. I mean, one, the show is taking a break, and this was the perfect time to do the time jump. I definitely will say that. This episode, perfect time to do the time jump right before a break. April Fool's Day is when it's coming back, so I'm perfectly fine with that. But, and, you know, I'm fine with them taking a little break. I'm perfectly fine. I think it's honestly time for them to take this break now. I think this really came at the perfect time, I gotta say. But overall, there are a few things that I'm questioning. I really don't understand what happened with Stefan and Caroline. What got Caroline to absolutely despise Stefan and want nothing to do with him? That really doesn't make much sense to me. Why she says I never want to hear the name Stefan Salvatore again? Is she lying? Is she trying to cover something up? That I don't really understand. Bonnie and Enzo. What got Bonnie to be with Enzo? Was Enzo just like the one person there for her? I feel like that's kind of what they're trying to say. That maybe Enzo, because Damon was around, he was just kind of the one person there that was there for her and really actually stayed close to her. I don't really know. That doesn't really make as much sense to me. But now we do understand how Damon got to Alaric and things like that. That makes sense. You know, we know now why Matt's is this vampire hunter. Now, I don't really understand. Was this his choice or did Rayna force him to do this? I don't really know, really. That doesn't make as much sense. We do know that Mystic Falls is much more dangerous now. I mean, it already was dangerous, but it's even more dangerous now, so it's a very dangerous place, and I think that's good that we saw that, and I think that they handled that really well. We now know why Valerie and Stefan are together, because obviously he can't be with Caroline, and it makes sense for him to be with Valerie, so that makes sense to me. But where it seems like we're headed from the promos is that Stefan's going to get away, I think, to New Orleans to be with Caroline, because we know that Caroline's now in New Orleans, and that's very interesting overall, so we'll have to see what's going to happen there. But overall, I'm happy that we did this time jump. I really am, because I gotta say, a lot of what we saw in the present, it was interesting, but the flash forwards were so much more interesting, and they really were killing the show. If they had gone any further with it, then it just wouldn't work. So it makes sense why we finally got to 3 years later. We understand why it had to happen. And a lot of it, like I said, does make sense. There's just a lot of things that there are some gaps that I think they do still need to fill. And they have time to do that. There's still time this season. I think there is time for them to just, you know, show something, maybe slow things down a bit. But it really does seem like they're trying to up the momentum, which I'm very happy about, because the momentum just hasn't really been there this season. And I really feel like they're trying to create genuine suspense, which I'm happy about. Like that scene with Bonnie, that really came out of nowhere, and it was this incredible scene. They really did a great, well, not really come out of nowhere, but they really did an incredible job with it. I love the way that was done, and I definitely really liked the way they handled that. Definitely really good stuff there. But overall, guys, I really did enjoy this episode overall. There, like I said, were some things I didn't like. I'm pretty sure we're done with Valerie and Mary, with Nora and Mary Louise. We haven't heard of them since last week, and I don't think we're going to. So Nora and Mary Louise, I hope that we're done with them. Maybe they'll make them of service because now it's 3 years later, but I don't really know. Overall, guys, let me know what you guys saw this episode. I really did enjoy this episode, I gotta say. Definitely one of the strongest of the season. Much stronger than they've been, really. This was a very strong episode. They really did a good job with it overall. Like I said, there are some gaps that need to be filled, but I think there's still time to fill them in, and I think the season's about to get a lot more interesting. So I'm intrigued. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Do you think now is the time to do the time jump? I really want to hear you guys think about that. Bonnie and Enzo, things like that. Do you think they can fill these gaps in? Are there things that just don't make sense? I'm sure there are some continuity issues, but I'm just glad the show's moving forward and not backward, because it really seems like this season, what's been is like they start something up and then they just go away. Now they can't do that because it's 3 years later. They have to move forward, and I'm happy they're doing that because, I was tired of the show, tricking us into thinking they're going somewhere and they're not, and I think it's very good the show's actually going somewhere. But that is my review. Hope you enjoy it. We'll see you guys in the next show, which will be for the originals, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.